Stab, stab. Stab, stab.
Welcome back, friends, to Two More Spooks. Woo!
We talk about a spooky film today.
There are not one, but two of us here. Yeah, I'm carrying on from last time when I had that really not awkward at all ending that I injected into the podcast.
Don't even remember how we ended.
Do you not remember when I just started doing like spooky noises?
I remember a spooky noise.
It wasn't at the beginning when I was doing the death rattle. It was right at the end.
No. Okay.
But anyway, welcome back to 2MoreTakes, everyone. We're doing another Halloween episode.
It's your boys.
Skinny penis.
No. Spooky.
My name is Jack.
Oh.
My name is Jack.
My name is Joe.
And you're all hoes. No, okay. We're in a very weird mood today because we're actually like we've. I don't know. It's like this one's like gonna both be like last one. It felt so intellectual when we were talking about it. Like we're actually talking about like I feel like this time it's going to be that, but because I almost wish like we had a silly spooky one, but at the same time like I do much prefer. This time around, at least, that we talk about some serious spooky films. Because to be fair, we talk about some random bullshit a lot of the time. But especially with like, I guess as well, it'll be quite confusing for a lot of people listening to this. Even though I did explicitly state it when we were promoting the last episode. This is part 2 of our Halloween special. It's not a continuation of the last talk whatsoever. They are 2 distinct entities. It's just part 1 and part 2 because there's 2 Halloween episodes we're doing.
We wanted to.
They're not actually related.
Yeah, we wanted to split. Obviously, we did Asian horror last time, and now we're like, let's have a look at the good old fashioned American horrors of late 70s, 80s, where things started to pick up.
You say American horrors. I think really only one of these on this list could kind of be considered American. Just because the other 2, one person would often shoot in the UK a lot, and the other one I think was made by a British guy, and you can tell that in some of the actors that were chosen in the nondescript area where there seems to just be American and British people roaming about.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that, though. Once again, my rendition of a famous theme in the opening should have given the hint that if you had not read the description of the video or the title, the first film we're talking about, of course, would be what, Joe?
Halloween. Spooky. Right, where are we? I don't know where to begin, to be honest.
Sorry, I just wanted to let you squirm there for a bit.
Halloween.
Well, I suppose we should begin with the fact that as of recording this, the new film just came out like a week ago.
Is it Halloween Kills or something?
Yes. I have not seen it. Have you seen it?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I have no intention of seeing it. I was going to say, it's a Halloween sequel, so anyone who knows Halloween as a franchise should know that basically the general rule is that if it's not Halloween 3, you should stay far away from it.
I mean, I wasn't too... I knew roughly a little bit about the original Halloween here and there, but I hadn't seen it before, actually. But,
before when we watched it together?
Yeah, no, I hadn't seen it properly.
That was a terrible experience, and I should have not been talking the entire time then. I did not realise that was your first experience.
Now, to be fair, I might have seen it, because here's the thing. I don't watch that many horror films anymore, but I used to watch a lot when I was little, and when I was too young for them. I watched a lot.
It's funny, you watched a lot of horror films when you were younger. I did not watch horror films for the bulk of my life up until recently.
Yeah.
Just because I most of the horror films I was familiar with, I associated as, the jump scare American garbage that we talked about briefly in the last episode.
But yeah, obviously we watched the Halloween.
Yes, John Carpenter's Halloween.
John Carpenter, yes.
John Carpenter, who I'm also starting to get into a bit more, really, in terms of his stuff, both his movies and music.
Yes. No, I'd seen a few of the John Carpenter films before, but again, I knew...
Which ones had you seen, just out of
I'd
curiosity?
seen The Thing.
I've still not seen The Thing.
You haven't seen The Thing?
I might have told you this in passing, but the film has been spoiled for me so much over the years.
No, well, that's the thing. That's why I knew a lot about Halloween, because it's it's fairly well known, and with all these films, even if you haven't seen them, you get the gist of it even without seeing them.
Yeah, I kind of wish that people would stop making video essays on John Carpenter, just so I could enjoy his films,
But yeah, I don't know what other John Carpenter films I've actually seen, because I'm not.
I could
good
rattle
with
some
names.
off for you. If you so there's Escape from New York.
I have seen, I believe. I've seen one of the Escape films. I don't know.
You might have seen Escape from LA.
I know, there's two of them.
Yeah, one of them is famously good, the other one is famously bad.
Mm-hmm.
There is Big Trouble in Little China.
I have seen bits of.
There's They Live, The Fog, not
Fog.
The Mist.
Yeah.
There is also Prince of Darkness.
Nope.
In the Mouth of Madness.
Nope.
Dark Star, Starman.
Nope.
Well, to be fair, you probably wouldn't have seen Dark Star just because it was a student film. So, but
no, I think out of the ones, The Fog, The Thing.
Yeah.
What was the other one? Escape from one of them.
Escape from New York or LA was there. Yeah.
I think
Ghosts of Mars. Have you seen Ghosts of
I haven't
Mars,
seen
Joe?
Ghosts of Mars. No.
Don't do that. Save yourself the trouble. Don't watch it. That was late 90s John Carpenter.
Yes.
But we're not here to talk about late 90s John Carpenter. We're here to talk about late 70s John Carpenter, really, or I guess mid 70s, probably when they were making it. But Halloween, not his first film, but I think a lot of people sort of. Oh, you know what? On the topic of his first film, not his first film, but also Assault on Precinct 13 is another one. That's one I recently saw. I absolutely adored it. But I think it's his third film, maybe his fourth. Well, Halloween, I actually think that it all forms a pretty cohesive narrative that basically just everyone, bar Donald Pleasance, was really helping with the film and trying to make it this really special thing. Like, apparently Donald Pleasance was really difficult to work with and was also drunk through the entire film.
Okay.
Which would explain a lot. By the way, if just you know who Donald Pleasance is, don't you? He's Dr. Loomis.
Oh, okay.
So
well,
he's the sort of
name, yes,
he's the British actor who is playing an American but can't really decide on his accent.
Yeah.
Apparently, that car scene in the beginning, he's extraordinarily drunk. And John Carpenter was just like, I don't want to deal with this, and he gave him like a proper like telling off. But apparently, Jamie Lee Curtis was like, she was doing like tons of background work as well on the film. It seems like it was a real labor of love from the people involved, and even John Carpenter's like old college buddy Nick Castle. He's the guy who played the body performance of Michael Myers.
No, it usually is. It's with these, especially with these old Hollywood, where people actually cared, and it's like everyone's this is the like stage guy who's like, let's just make him a character in the film, and he'll do this and that, and yeah.
But yeah, I guess like I know I've sort of rattled off about like the making of the film rather than really talking about it. I think it's interesting to note because Halloween really was not just the start of of like a genre, but also, which obviously that genre being the slasher genre, it's sort of like a proto slasher, everyone says, but also just like filming techniques, like the Panavision cameras that were not well used. They were brand new at the time. I think it was maybe like a third of the budget went towards just the cameras alone, basically, because it was a super low budget film.
Yeah.
Not like no budget, but it was super low budget for like the old sort of system. Also, it was not a success upon release, but it sort of became like a European darling of like, us refined Europeans enjoyed the film, and that's how it sort of gained its cult following and then started making money over time, really. But its initial release, it did not do well. But yeah, I guess so. Halloween is the story of Michael Myers,
not Mike Myers.
Not Mike Myers. That was a mistake that I made many years ago when in reference to It was, yeah. That's just one of those weird cultural things where like, you're like Mike Myers. But yeah, it's the story of Michael Myers, who's sort of like this. He's this masked killer in a blue jumpsuit. I'm actually dressed like him in the poster right now. This is a rare time where I'm going to predict what the poster is because I've already drawn it before the end of the podcast. But yeah, basically he's sort of an embodiment of evil. He's sort of like, he doesn't really have a motive. He just goes around and kills people, and he's kind of just like, he's almost like a Lovecraftian horror, and he's kind of impossible to interpret. But you have your characters, Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, who is just one of a few sort of high schoolers who are sort of babysitting on the night of Halloween, and Michael Myers escapes from the sanatorium where he's been held since he was a child, and Dr. Loomis, his doctor, who is fully aware of how evil he is, goes on the hunt, sort of pursuing him across the country as Michael Myers makes it back to Haddonfield, Illinois. Haddonfield, Illinois, where he goes on a murderous rampage, trying to kill all of the young, horny teenagers, and Laurie Strode, who's kind of just the sort of upstanding prude type.
Again, it's one of those classic horror movie tropes that you always murder the naked people or anyone who's having sex or anything.
This is before the tropes.
I know, but this is where it began really with this, and I know the Psycho came before it, but naked women must die.
Naked women must die. That sounds like a rom-com from the early 90s, like John Tucker Must Die, and Naked Women Must Die. There's not really too much to talk about when it comes to the story of Halloween, other than the basics. Obviously, Michael Myers is terrifying, in that, he's got no motive to it. He's just like, he's unreasonable. You can't reason with him. He's just evil, and he just passes through everything.
And it's always that unknown of, you never see his face really, and spooky, scary, masked killer.
Well, even you say that though, but at the end of the film, we do actually see his face, and it's not like when you see Jason in the Friday the 13th movies, where he's also scarred and fucked up. It's like, no, Michael Myers just looks like a normal guy. That's the scary point. Is that the costume is that is his him being represented on the external. But even with just his normal face, he's just a regular guy. He's just the embodiment of evil, basically, and that's all there is to him. I mean, what do you think of like the characters, for instance?
I mean, it's got some interesting stuff going on. It's very simple for the most part. You've really only got Laurie Strode. Four
characters, really.
Yeah, Laurie Strode, and she's got friends and stuff, but they're just
Annie, who is the sort of the bitchy one.
Again, they're all just
kind of still friends with Laurie. Or I think that's Annie anyway. Then there's the couple that sort of is friends with them, but is trying to bone on Halloween night stuff.
The doctor, the policeman.
Oh yeah, the policeman.
Not in it that much. He's just the dad of one of the people, isn't he?
I think he's Annie's dad actually.
Yeah.
Because they're smoking weed in the car at one point, and then they pull up and they're like, "Shit, it's your dad." Yeah. But there's so many like neat little touches in the film, just beyond the sort of simple stuff. Obviously, Dr. Loomis is iconic as well, just as Michael Myers is. He's a psychotherapist, or a psychiatrist who basically became so cynical about his patient that he started carrying around a firearm, and he goes on the hunt to kill him. Because he's worried, because he completely gets it. He just gets that Michael Myers is evil, and that's it. And there's no middle ground. There's no nuance to it. That's all there is. And then obviously Laurie Strode is. I mean, I think she's a very good sort of protagonist, really, and that she's just a normal person. But I mean, obviously there's a few times where, again, before the tropes have sort of existed, she makes a few mistakes, but I think people over-exaggerate how many mistakes she makes in the film. She throws away the knife inappropriately once, and that's it. And then the second time, he doesn't even get the knife again after that. So
I don't really have that much to say about it. It's like, she's not terribly interesting, but she's, she does the job of both being vulnerable and also being able to fight back a bit. So
yeah.
like,
Well, her thing is that she's smart. Is the thing, and that's the difference between her and the others. Is that and as well, she doesn't brush aside the threat. She's she's kind of been aware of the threat the entire time because she's the only one who sort of pays attention to the world around her. So I do think, and I obviously the performance isn't anything special really, but I mean I don't know, I still think she's really good in the role, and I think the role is maybe a little simple, but I would still say it's something special just from how it's presented. But obviously it's nothing by comparison to the sort of the performance of Donald Pleasance in some scenes, and then the physical performance of Nick Castle as Michael Myers.
But I think obviously the bit where I'd say this film excels more in the rest of the filmmaking of the sound and the camera, right?
Yeah, I mean there's that one shot opening, or the scene that's meant to seem like it's all one continuous shot.
Yeah.
But in the Myers house, which is, I mean, that's also just some fantastic filmmaking, and that they filmed that after the fact because it's much cheaper to just find a broken down house and then just redo it up, refurbish it rather than breaking it afterwards. And it looks great. That scene looks really good. There's a few times where obviously it doesn't, and especially with the version we were watching, at least the one that I was getting while we were streaming it. It was not very good when it came to the dark scenes, but I've seen it in pretty good condition on Blu-ray, and it looks fantastic. Also they're just the actual shots themselves. I mean, I think it's obviously. It's ironic that we're talking about Panavision right now, or not ironic, but I guess it's poetic in that it's going to come into it's going to come into conversation later on as well in a film that happened only 2 years after this one. But yeah, I mean, I suppose the issue here is that we're talking about a film that's kind of a classic, and but I really want to gush about this film. But what is there to really gush about besides just listing things off? I mean, I guess one big thing is, of course, the soundtrack.
Yeah, it's got an iconic soundtrack, which even I had heard many a time.
Yeah, well, John Carpenter is that's his whole sort of I guess brand really.
Yeah, because we were going to say I think we mentioned it to each other before about how few of the soundtracks are a bit similar with John Carpenter films, but they are quite iconic.
They're all distinct, I'd say, but it's like the genre is similar, but
he has the same
film is
style
purpose-tooled
with the soundtrack.
I think Assault on Precinct 13 and Halloween and Escape from New York are kind of similar. They're kind of, if you put them all next to each other, they would sound like they were iterations of each other. But that's mainly just because they were sort of made around the same sort of times, but also they're very evocative of the same sort of things, especially Escape from New York and Assault on Precinct 13. So, but yeah, I mean, I have nothing but positives to really talk about Halloween personally. I'm sure that it might have. I'm sure with any horror film, it's aged in some regards, but I think it's probably the one out of many films from that era that is aged the most graceful out of any.
Yeah, no, I mean, even obviously, as I said, I knew bits, I'd seen bits, but watching it for the first time properly, it was still good. I enjoyed pretty much all of it. There wasn't anything, even if it was, it had the cliches, it had the formula, but it didn't do it. It did it very well.
Yeah,
it's not like I had issues with it.
But but I mean, overall, you said that I think you said you enjoyed Halloween, though.
Yeah. It's it reminds me of all the other classic ones I'd seen in my days. So yeah, it's very much of that time, but it's still good.
Yeah, I think that's probably. I mean, that's a good outcome. I think, at least, as you said, it's obviously got a lot of those things where we just recognize it now, and it's like, well, we've seen this before, but I think it's nice that it's still managed to grab you somewhat, even if it's just like, oh, this is enjoyable.
No, it's quite iconic. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's again, unfortunately, like this is one where we could either like speak very quickly on it or speak tons about it. But yeah, I guess we'll get into it more about like final thoughts and that later on. But next film, would you like to introduce this one?
So this is one actually, right? The next film is one I'd heard the name, I'd heard of it more recently, but I hadn't seen this one, and I hadn't really heard of this film until probably in the last year.
Really?
Yeah, I knew nothing of it. So this one was a fresh one for me.
Well, in terms of viewing, I'm on the same page, but I had been hearing about this film for God, it must be like 6 years now, maybe 7.
Yeah, no, I'd heard something of it, but it was when I think a few friends mentioned it because it's another thing. If anyone's ever heard of Dead by Daylight, the video game, both obviously Halloween, Michael Myers is in that, and also there was a recent edition of Hellraiser to that spooky game, and I was like, who the hell is this pointy head? He's got nails in his face.
Ah, yes, Pinhead.
Yeah, no. Pinhead himself.
Yes.
And I was really like, what? I had to look it up a bit because I was like, what the hell is this character? How have I never heard? I've seen many a horror film in my days, but Hellraiser's one I really knew not much about. So,
well, we were like creating this list and like, and yeah, I think I brought it up because I was going through the list and I was consulting you about it.
Yeah.
And you're like, Hellraiser, I think I've heard of that one, but I haven't seen it yet. And I was like, I haven't seen it either yet, but I knew what it was. I knew very much about what this is about because there's another one that's like I've had this spoiled for me a lot in recent years, and I was right on board there. Like I guess thinking to myself, I have such sights to show you. Because yeah, this is one that actually has inspired a lot of stuff that I hold near and dear to my heart. But yeah, have we even mentioned that it's Hellraiser?
I mean, I mentioned Hellraiser.
I think you did. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
Look, we're all falling apart here. It's fine. No, the good thing about this one was the fact we both hadn't seen it. Like, we were both more familiar with the other two. This is the one we were least familiar with.
And we watched them alone.
Yes. Yeah, I watched that in my own time the other night.
Same, yeah.
And it was an interesting one.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Yeah,
I
actually quite enjoyed it. Again, the only thing I knew was what I'd looked up more recently when I heard about it, and I was like, I need to check out what this film is. And I heard a few bits, and I was like, okay. But on watching it, it was actually very good. But yes, it was very weird. Which is a lot of horror films get weird, but
Joe, you know my policy on weird stuff, so you know that I thought this film was atrocious. I hated it, every second of it. This is an awful film, and you shouldn't watch it. I totally didn't enjoy all of this. What can I say? I mean, we've established at this point that I love the wacky. But this is like, it's not just wacky; it's also got like more sort of serious stuff to it. But I mean, it's nuts, and I love it. I think.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I actually found that the first half of the film was actually quite immersive. I would have thought there was. I just remember there being a point maybe towards the third act where I think it's just. I said to myself when the young character entered the fray, the daughter, because she wasn't in it much until the later in the film.
She sort of it's weird because she's kind of the protagonist, but she kind of only shows up once at the beginning in the first act, maybe like twice, because I think there's like a dinner before the second act kind of stuff.
Yeah, she shows up a couple of times, but then she enters the fray later on, and that's when the film took a more stereotypical turn of, oh, I'm watching a horror film, and
What do you mean, Joe?
No. Here's all I'll say is she had a bit where she's, where she. she always has to have like a one-liner where she's like, "Oh, go back here to hell, you bitch," or something. You know, one of those. And I'm like,
"Go to hell." That's all it is.
No, there's always one of those though. But there was something, I can't quite remember what it was. There was a bit where I was like, oh, it threw me off for a split second, with her. But other than that, I actually no, the whole film itself was very good, and it was actually quite a unique one, to be fair.
Yeah, I think I can understand why the success of it warranted like a million terrible sequels, just like Halloween.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Hellraiser became. It basically became like another Nightmare on Elm Street / Friday the 13th. It's just, extra dimensional demons come and take you to be tortured and pleasured in the hellscape or whatever. Yeah, as an original sort of standalone film, I think it's just fantastic. There are bits of it where you can clearly tell, like, some things were thought of after the fact, or there were some setups that didn't really properly pay off. But the core story itself, I think, was everything was paid off and set up perfectly with that. But
it wasn't the one thing as well. It wasn't actually too long as well. It was quite just your standard length film.
The pacing was quite good.
Yeah,
just in terms of the feel as well. It was quite short.
But yeah,
I suppose by modern standards, it was quite short.
But yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect when I watched it, but I did actually quite enjoy Hellraiser, and I think cinematically, it's probably. I'm trying to think. It has some very good shots, but I think in comparison to the other two,
I mean,
it doesn't stand out as strong.
Yeah,
I think
the difference is that the other ones have subtlety and refined camera work,
whereas
this one has like basically. I think I said this to you before you'd seen the film, but just in passing reference, I think I said to you, it feels like it was a low budget film where all of the budget was put towards the special effects, basically. And that's the big appeal. That's the visuals, rather than the camera work necessarily, the cinematography. Because there are some shots, as you said, where it's like, oh, this is really good, but I think a lot of it is quite mediocre or quite by the book, rather.
Yeah, but I still found, I think it was more the uniqueness of the story and the characters, the characters that do come from the Hell dimension or.
The Cenobites.
They're obviously the special effects on them. Some of them aren't perfect, but they are quite good considering.
Did you love the guy with the goggles who's really fat?
I mean, I the one that I think was my favourite actually was the guy who just kept clicking his teeth or whatever.
Yeah, the guy who had like no eyes, but had his
he
mouth,
just
like,
kept making
open.
weird noises, and I found him quite funny, to be honest.
Yeah.
Again, there were a couple bits where it's like, oh, there's always in horror, any horror film, it's like you're scared, and then you're like, well, that bit's just funny. But
especially for modern, I think back then it probably wouldn't have been as much. But I mean, there is a point. Yeah, I know what you mean. Where it's like there is a point when you're watching this film and you're like, that fat demon with goggles is pulling out a kitchen knife and just got killed by debris, and it's like, and I'm like, what is going on? And there is some camp in there, but I think it's like it's almost it's like it approaches like the sort of camp of Evil Dead 2, but it takes that more serious tone by comparison, especially with the character of his name Uncle Frank, I think, or something.
Yeah,
Frank, I think is the character. Yeah. Oh my God! What like
to Daddy?
What a fucking terrifying villain. Or I guess one of the terrifying villains, really. But
it's quite an interesting. He's quite an interesting one. And
I love his entrance into the film. That moment when his body begins reforming out of the floor and his arms, and that's it. That's all that there is at the beginning. It's absolutely disgusting, and I love it.
That is one thing I was expecting, because I knew of something to do with chains and being ripped to pieces possibly. And I was like, oh, I'm expecting some gore. And then I think someone we know, I mentioned who likes this film, said when I mentioned it, he's like, "Oh no, it's not that gory actually." And I'm like, "Okay." And apparently, the thing
I
is,
know exactly who you're talking
about. I know,
God
and he said, "Oh, he doesn't
God
do gore, but Hellraiser's kind of that goofy gore." But it's like, is it? I'd say it's still pretty gory.
Yeah,
it's not that. It's
unpleasant, is what it is.
And I enjoyed eating my dinner while watching it.
Yeah, Hellraiser was one where I knew to not bring dinner to that evening.
It was just unfortunate timing, but I thought I've seen gore before.
Yeah, here's the father's face plastered onto the uncle in a really disgusting bit where there's ooze around the lines of his face. Yeah. It's not a particularly well done effect, but it's still it's disturbing enough where the performance of whatever his name is, the guy who plays the dad, but obviously then in the end plays Frank.
Yeah.
He's I think he's great. I think they're all great. I oh god, it's it's obviously with the exception of the daughter who's kind of just doing the generic character thing from it. I get what you mean where it's she's a stock character really, but her story is still pretty engaging. But the wife, I mean, she, how I was talking about, I think, I don't know what film it was, but it was a while ago, and we are definitely talking about it on the podcast, where it's I feel like someone had been genetically engineered to be evil. I feel like she was the same. She had a British accent, she smoked cigarettes all the time, and she had evil, makeup on her face, and she did evil things. It's oh god, you want us to find her to become the villain or whatever.
No, to be fair though, at first I thought, oh, maybe she's not that evil, but she does take quite a turn into, I'm just a murderer now, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept just for a serial killer.
Yeah,
thing.
and
she's the one doing the murders.
Yeah, and it's the motivation is quite questionable, but it does actually, because I was like, I wonder if someone probably would do that if they were so inclined.
Yeah. It's I think it's you definitely understand that she's just not happy in the relationship she's in, but she's trying to sort of make it work. But at the same time, she's also being deceitful and sort of dishonest to her husband, and kind of taking advantage of him.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, I think towards the beginning you kind of, I don't know, it's in a weird sort of territory where the beginning of the film it kind of gets revealed that Frank kind of raped her.
Yep.
But she kind of liked it, so it was it's very this is very risque and stuff like that.
But no, that's the thing. Both their characters, he did do it to her, but then she also, she did enjoy it, and she's like, I'd come back for more, and so she's back for more basically, and they're in it together.
Or is he back for more, Joe?
They're both in it together, which is the thing, and
he's back for more, Joe.
Yeah.
All right, whatever.
Blood,
yeah. Blood.
I also love the fact that a few drops of blood take him from 0 to 50, and then the rest
and then
is
suddenly
quite.
He needs entire bodies worth of blood just so he can get a bit more skin.
Yeah. But other than that,
the effects on his makeup is all really good, especially when he starts to get muscle and you can see all the sort of veins and fibers and tendons that are sort of growing in. It's disgusting. It's so icky and horrible.
As you said, they definitely put quite a bit of budget into the effects, but they are very good for the most part. And
that's what I mean. Because the rest of most of the film just takes place in that one house, and it's. I mean, it really. I mean, as well. Also, there's the question of I would hazard a guess that this one was also filmed in the UK, or. But yeah, I mean, it's because Clive Barker, I think, is English. He did Life Force, I think, which is also English. So it's and obviously there's so many characters in the film who are English, and it's very. I'm gonna be honest, it's very distracting for me watching it. Where it's it's like, oh, there's like 3 English characters in this film that are like within a very close vicinity of each other, yet it's supposed to be like America.
The only one who stood out for me was the wife, because she was very like, yeah, she's immediately. I'm like, why is she British?
Well, that was like an initial thing, but once I got over that, it was like, okay, well, why are all these like bachelors British? Because it's like with her, it's like, well, they moved to where he grew up, so it made sense.
Yeah.
But all of like the prospective murder victims, with the exception of one, I think, are all British. Like 2 of them are British,
See,
and
that,
it's like
that I didn't notice. I wasn't really paying attention to their voices because they, I was looking forward to them getting murdered actually, but yeah, no, you're right that. Yeah.
But it's like obviously hers is like, okay, well, it's because she's evil as well. It's like it's the generic stereotype of like the evil person must be British. That's it. I remember it was Gladiator. I said that Joaquin Phoenix was genetically engineered in that film to be evil.
Anyway, but Hellraiser was good though.
And obviously we'll have a lot to talk about with the next film. But I gotta be honest. I think I always felt like with Hellraiser, once you get past the basics of, I mean, really the only thing left to talk about is like the Cenobites, really, and the premise of like of like existentialism and stuff like that. Because it's like, oh, and also it would be a sin if I did not mention this, but there is a direct there is like this film is seems to be a direct inspiration for one of my favorite series, which would happen to be Berserk. And in Berserk there are 4 like demon like god type people who get summoned from a small object, who look, one of them looks especially very much like the fatty goggles guy, so like visually they're almost identical to that person, but or to that being, but the exact amount of people, the exact sort of MacGuffin of it's an artifact that can summon them forth, and summon you into sort of their realm. It's too close for me to not make that reference for anyone who knows Berserk, but I won't get into it any more than that. I just thought it was a really interesting note that I just noticed just by chance, and I don't think anyone has ever talked about it.
But yeah.
I guess we'll move on to The Shining.
Yes.
I don't know why we put a Kubrick film on this list, because I do feel like, what is there to say, basically, other than let's praise the shit out of this and talk for ages on it. I guess we should just get right into it. Joe, can I introduce The Shining?
Go ahead.
The Shining is a film by Mr. Stanley Kubrick. You might not have heard of him. Mr. Stanley Kubrick made this film in the year of our Lord, 1980. And I believe it was also made in Britain, because Stanley Kubrick's quite famous for filming his films in Britain, but likewise, I don't know that for certain. I just know that Full Metal Jacket was filmed in Britain, so perhaps all the claims I've been making are false, but that's why I mentioned that a lot of these films were probably filmed in Britain and had a lot of British connections. But The Shining is marvelous, basically. It's I think it goes without saying for anyone who's familiar with The Shining or has watched it that it's basically a masterpiece, Stanley Kubrick's pretty proficient in, or he was pretty proficient in knocking those out. He's pretty good at the whole masterpiece thing, basically. But The Shining is about Jack Nicholson, or Jack Torrance, who is an aspiring writer and sort of a job's worth sort of handyman type, in that he doesn't really have a proper job. So he's trying to support his sort of like modest family of Shelley Duvall. Danny, of course, is their son. Basically, Jack Torrance takes a job taking care of the Overlook Hotel over the sort of season of winter and sort of, I guess, like sort of late autumn, early spring time. So like 6 months, this cabin, this hotel or whatever, is completely abandoned, and they are the only people sort of there, and they're sort of frozen in during the winter, and basically, they start to losing it a bit. While they're up there, especially Jack, who, while trying to sort of, write his magnum opus, his sort of master novel that will put him on the map as this great artist, he completely goes batshit, and he starts acting very weird and doing very weird things and behaving very weird towards his family. But it's kind of ambiguous as to whether these things started with the Overlook Hotel or whether this has always been Jack Torrance.
Well, that's the thing. This film does always have a lot of questions. It throws things in, as most good horror films do. They get weird, but they don't explain things, and that's what is. It leaves questions about who is actually evil here? Why did this happen? And especially the ending of The Shining is very confusing. But
yeah. Well, that's just, I think, the film throughout as well. But obviously, the ending is that cherry on the top of what? But yeah, The Shining is. I mean, we could go into literally hours of conversation about how the cinematography is one of the best things ever.
Cinematography, sounds. Even the sound is. I think the cinematography is the big one.
Yeah, the camera work and how when Danny's exploring the Overlook Hotel and stuff like that.
How to make corridors scary.
Yes, with sound design and cameras. Yeah, it's just anything could be behind these doors, but you also know that for such a big place, they're still so trapped and cramped together. Basically, it's it's the ultimate oxymoron of a location in that it is a prison, but it's so large and should be liberating, but it isn't. But yeah, I mean it's, and then obviously there's the sound design as well. The music is similar to Halloween, iconic. You have those sort of electronic horns that sort of blare in the background. The boom, 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 boom,
and even
boom, boom.
Even just the sounds itself. They try and fit. I always remember the bit where he's throwing the ball at the wall. That sounds like a heartbeat or music kicking in, but it's just him throwing the ball at the wall for a minute.
Even just the musical stings, when the music's building, with the violins, when Shelley Duvall's going up to Jack while he's sort of writing in the dark, and then it sort of crescendos when he rips up the page. It's I think what was it recently we were talking about? I guess it would be Halloween, just obviously on the podcast, but there's obviously Halloween. I guess we sort of skipped over the specific of it builds tension really well in that film. But The Shining also does a similar thing. But I suppose also, obviously, in terms of films we've recently talked about, the most relevant, of course, to how The Shining is of course when we made reference to Stanley Kubrick when we talk about Ringu.
Yeah.
That was obviously recently is something we watched. Is something that I was being reminded of very much when we were watching this.
Well, it's the passage of time, and
even just the titles of it's this day and it's this time. But obviously in Ringu it's more specific. But it's I love how wildly inconsistent the I mean I love and hate it, but I love how wildly inconsistent the titles are in
ambiguity, doesn't it? Of you start, it's they arrive 2 months later, you have a big jump, and then it's Tuesday, Friday, Monday, and you're who knows
one point,
when
it just says 4:30 p.m.
Yeah, on
or something.
Yeah, it says evening some point, and
But yeah, I mean, it just builds this feeling of it's a place just filled with evil, but it's not necessarily supernatural. It could just be the presence of being in an abusive family or whatever, basically.
Yeah. Well, there's so many things going on with both. Is it ghosts? Is it just mental health? Is it just the isolation, the building, the storm? Yeah, there's a lot of things. So.
Is it just allegory? Oh, that's one of the greatest things. So we won't get too much into fan theories, but I think one of my favorites is the obsession with. Obviously, I'm guessing it was just a joke from Stanley Kubrick. Because obviously everyone says that. Well, not everyone. All of the theorists, the sort of conspiracy theorists, say Stanley Kubrick faked the moon landing, and then he puts a rocket ship on Danny's sweater, and all of them lose their shit, and it's he's mocking you, okay? He's mocking you, and he's probably also referencing, I don't know, the other space film he did. Shut up. I love that one though, because it's like everyone's like, oh, it's talking about the moon landing. It's like, did you even watch the film, or did you just look at the sweater?
Yeah.
I mean, sure, you could infer anything from it, but it's like that one I think was the dumbest one that I heard. Was it's about the moon landings, and I'm like, it's on it's the rocket ship on Danny's sweater.
Yeah. Yeah, I do love a film with a lot of, I don't need answers. As long as you make me, I'm like, I've got several answers in my head, but I don't need to know which one is right,
Yeah, I mean, that's probably how I feel, or how I felt about Ju-On, and that's probably because, again, it's all, a lot of it's in the delivery, like a joke, really. It's in how the punchline is delivered, and I think. So again, it's not just about the comedian; it's also about the audience. And I think, obviously, for both of us, we can look at The Shining and go, it does that phenomenally well, and I think that's why it sort of deserves the status of masterpiece, really. But obviously, the Ju-On, I realized, was like, okay, it works for me, but not for you. But I think it's interesting to note because, again, like similar to Ring, it's got that procedural feel. I think I'm starting to really enjoy procedural horror, really. Like, just atmospheric. Obviously, atmospheric is such a generic term for it, but procedural, it's like, it's just day in the life.
Well, this is the thing about The Shining. My favourite part is always watching Jack Nicholson just be Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
Because
I completely agree.
It does have that build up to, you gotta build the tension. You gotta, it starts off slower, but it's still, there's still stuff going on.
I mean, on rewatch, I would say that there is obviously a slow build in like from a certain point, but pretty much after the introduction, the sort of prologue, like once it's been like a month or 2 months or whatever, and they're there, we were rewatching it together, and I said to you, like, I didn't realize that I didn't remember this being like so close to like everything started to escalate as fast as it did.
Yeah.
Upon first rewatch, it was like really slow and really procedural. But upon second rewatch, like, it all felt much more fluid and consistent. And that's not to say that the first rewatch was bad. It's just that was one of those rewatches like watching 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's like the procedural nature here, and the sort of the slice of life stuff that's sort of injected into the greater sort of plot. It does bog down the film slightly for me.
But
in the pacing feels longer, but that is something that, upon reflection, is not there on The Shining. I think might still be there in 2001, to be fair. But I do think that I understand when people say that, like, a Kubrick film is like a tough hurdle to get over to begin with. Because if you haven't seen a Kubrick film before, you kind of, it's kind of like a bit obtrusive, really. I mean, my first Kubrick film was Lolita, so. I mean, that was a fucking bad time, I'll tell you that. But I'm guessing your first Kubrick film was probably like Doctor Strangelove or something.
No, that wasn't my first. I mean, the first one.
Just because you're a Peter Sellers fan, I was.
No, curious. I didn't actually watch. That was one I was really like. I really wanted to watch it, but I never had access to that one either.
Oh yeah.
No, it might be The Shining. Might be the first one because then it was Shining, then Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah. That's also the release, I believe, as well.
Yeah.
Full Metal Jacket, I think, also sort of came out in like the late 80s. Just talking about one of the last films as well.
Yeah. Again, I don't want to go into too, but yeah, I think The Shining was one of the first Kubrick films I knew of. So
I would agree in terms of new of. I think actually, no, sorry, my first Kubrick film was A Clockwork Orange, so that's even more obtrusive than Lolita.
See, that one I haven't got round to yet. So.
Yeah, Clockwork Orange is very. I mean, it's great, but it's also like even the book is like such a mess for trying to decipher it and stuff like that. So it's, but yeah, but I think as a Kubrick starting point, I would actually say that this is probably the perfect starting point for Kubrick stuff. Although it is debatable whether it's the highest point, because I do think that The Shining could be the contender for the best Kubrick film ever, but I mean it's like Tarantino for me, it's like it's a tall order, like a very tall list for trying to overtake each other. All of Kubrick's films I absolutely adore, even Lolita. Maybe not Lolita, I think that's just the source material for Lolita. It's very, yeah. But the rest of his films are absolutely marvelous. I love Eyes Wide Shut, even though Tom Cruise is kind of boring in it. He's kind of still doing a good performance because Kubrick's prompting him, but I'm sad that Kubrick's not with us anymore. But at the same time, he kind of has that like Kurt Cobain sort of status of he died a little younger than he really should have, especially Kurt Cobain, obviously. But Kubrick, he led a much longer life, but and he sort of, I guess, he never faded into obscurity because of when he died and what his body of work was up until that point. I don't think he's ever made a bad film, really, from what my knowledge is. But yeah, I mean, Stanley Kubrick, The Shining, Jack Nicholson.
Love a bit of Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, I mean, talk about I think that's probably
Mr. Eyebrows himself.
Yeah, Mr. Grinch. I absolutely adore Jack Nicholson in the roles he's played. Oh my god, he's even in the Tim Burton Batman when he's playing that cartoonish, bizarre Joker. It's just he's amazing. That performance is right up there for me with Heath Ledger's. Not in the same category, but
yeah.
That's something that both those performances had. But yeah, I guess we'll get into final thoughts, though, unless you have anything else to say on The Shining.
No, again, we don't want to get lost in a maze of Kubrick film stuff.
Maze. Yeah, I got you. I got the reference.
Or a hotel.
Shame you didn't get mine.
That's good.
All right, Joe. Final thoughts on Halloween. What are we thinking? You don't have to give it a rating, but just remember that you do.
I'll throw numbers out there. They mean nothing because they will change on a consistent basis.
What do the numbers mean, Joseph?
The numbers, Mason. Right. Halloween was good. But I think out of the three, might be my least favourite. It's the beginnings of, cliche horror, slasher, that stuff. But cinematically, it's very good. Soundtrack, iconic. But I just don't think it's as interesting as it was when it came out. Because, again, there's so many slasher films now.
Again, I think it's the comedian and the audience thing.
No, I know.
It's that it works for me. It might not work for you. And that's all fine.
Yeah. No, I still really enjoyed it, but I think it is just the least interesting in comparison to the other two.
Yeah.
So we'll leave Halloween at a 7, maybe a 7.5.
Okay, your answer is acceptable.
Yeah.
I was gonna say if that was shit was gonna be a 6 or lower. I was about to be
No.
If it had been a 5, I might have
no. Here's the thing.
Spit take, but
5 is average film. Halloween is good. And it is a classic.
Yeah.
It's a 7.5, somewhere around there. Well, yeah, do you want to do your Halloween one? Or
Yeah. No, we'll just standard practice, Joe. I think John Carpenter's always been a man of his era. He's always been able to adapt to eras quite well, with the exception of the 90s, basically. But yeah, Halloween for me is... I mean, for all of the shit I might have talked about it while we were watching, nitpicking and doing stuff like that, again, it's the mark of a good film when all I can sort of do is sort of nitpick the minor details. It's either the sort of sign of a really good film or a really bad one, because if it's a really good film, then I don't have to really talk about any of the plot because it was all good, and it doesn't really warrant sort of negative criticism. But if it's all bad, then it's well, what do I talk about? I might as well focus on the other details, because it's the plot is just so mediocre or garbage. It's why would you even bring it up, really? But Halloween is one of those films where I think that it is absolutely marvelous. I do think that I can look past the history that has happened in the meantime, and I think that is just something that I think is a thing. I think between us is that I think it'll obviously range on different films. I'm sure there'll be films from. And there have been films where you're more sort of, engaged with them, and I'm not. But I think in terms of how films, become dated or or don't become dated. I think I always have that historian's sort of, I guess, gaze. But yeah, and then there's of course Star Wars, which I love, and I had to get Star Wars in, by the way. But
very scary.
But yeah, very scary film, very very scary franchise, especially to talk about. But yeah, Halloween. In terms of a rating, I'm going to give it an 8. I think. Because it has aged in places, but I still absolutely adore it. I think it's one of my favorite John Carpenter films, even though he has a lot of great ones to choose from. I'm sure some of his other films have aged better, but I can sort of look past the slew of like Friday the 13th films and stuff like that, and especially our modern horrors where it's got like fucking Truth or Dare and stuff like that, where it's like. This thing is it's more refined, it's more classy. Like, there's no blood in the entire film. It's just about building suspense and making you fear your neighborhood. And I think it does it almost flawlessly. So it's an 8 from me.
Well,
Joe, Hellraiser.
Yeah, Hellraiser, Pinhead, and the Cenobites, and Fleshman.
Fleshman.
Frank. Yeah,
no, I love that. No, Fleshman.
No, I did enjoy it. I enjoyed Hellraiser. As I said, it's fresh.
You sound really enthusiastic.
I know. I'm trying to. I don't know. I must be a bit worn out today. I don't know.
I think we're both a bit worn out today, unfortunately. But
right.
Yeah.
I did enjoy it. I think it was also because it's a fresh one. It was recently the most interesting thing I've watched, because obviously I knew The Shining, I knew a little bit of Halloween, and again that was I knew what to expect. Hellraiser, didn't know what to expect. Quite enjoyed it. It was quite interesting. Has a couple of issues here and there, but it's not I think for me I the issues didn't stand out too much. So Hellraiser, I want to put it just above Halloween, but not way ahead. So we're going to go 7.5, maybe a little bit higher, but definitely lower than 8 for me.
Okay.
So 7.5 to 8 is Hellraiser.
All right.
Yourself?
That's fine. Yeah. Yeah. I think I think they're both unique in their own ways, but obviously Hellraiser has that absurdity to it that it's not just comical, but obviously it's also horrific. And I definitely can understand your decision to sort of like I can understand your feelings of feeling that it's higher than Halloween. I have to be honest, I'm struggling with this rating, which I rarely do because I'm quite matter of fact about my ratings a lot of the time when I do mention them after my fucking tangents. But with Hellraiser and Halloween, I'm kind of stumped a little bit because I like them both, but I think. It's like I like them in different ways. It's like Halloween has that sort of classy, refined sort of like... It's almost like Halloween is like Sean Connery James Bond. Or no, Roger Moore James Bond. Classy and sort of elegant. Whereas like Hellraiser is like Daniel Craig James Bond. It's kind of messy, but it's also exciting. Yeah. It's kind of rugged. But it's like I like them differently. I like them about the same, but differently. Halloween's quite intellectual, and Hellraiser is kind of like schlocky and sort of campy, and not necessarily in the presentation, but it's like again, it's like that's a guy with pins glued to his head, That
man's got style.
That man's got style, yeah. That'll be the style in the next 10 years. But yeah, I guess I'll give it like I will give Hellraiser an 8 out of 10. I'll give it the same as Halloween, but I probably like Halloween a little bit more. Yeah. The Shining, Joe.
Kubrick's The Shining.
Yes. Not Stephen King's The Shining.
Again, I just, love a bit of Jack Nicholson. And the cinematography in The Shining is very good.
Yes.
The sound is good as well. Again, it's not as iconic as the main theme of Halloween or anything, but it is standout,
I mean, I don't know.
It's not one you can, get in your head. You can't really get it stuck in your head like the Halloween one, but it is.
I think it's more subdued in that sort of instance, because Halloween is quite overbearing on purpose, whereas The Shining's kind of like it's more subtle and it's in the background.
But. Yeah, you called it a masterpiece. It is up there.
For a second there, I thought you were about to call me out. I was like,
I'm
well, fair
saying,
enough. But yeah,
I'm just saying, you know, it is, for me, it's quite difficult to call something a masterpiece just because that, for me, it has to be perfect. I don't think The Shining is perfect, but it is close.
But again, this is, do you remember what I said about Predator?
Yeah.
What negative things did we have to say about it?
Could,
in the discussion.
If we went in depth, I could find things to pick apart.
Yeah,
as
but
always.
that's like, again, every masterpiece can have that. Though,
I know,
because there's always one thing that's never going to be perfect. Perfection is impossible.
No, but that's just my mindset. Is even if something is near perfect, I can't call it a masterpiece if it's not perfect.
Yeah. Well, but would you suppose then, in that respect, that nothing will ever be a masterpiece then to you?
It is almost.
This is
impossible.
me propositioning a theory, by the way, not being like aggressive.
It is almost impossible for something to be a masterpiece.
Okay.
But that's why, obviously, your ratings. You rated Halloween at an 8. I rated it like 7.5, 7.5. My ratings are always going to be slightly lower than yours because my ratings.
Well, I know this well. I've always
like
forced
that.
You into this role as well.
I know. The numbers don't mean anything for me.
So that's another thing. So if you disagree with Joe. I mean, he's wrong, but no. Fuck you.
My ratings have their own rules. So.
Yes, yeah. Joe's special rules. If it was Jay or someone else, like them, you can yell at us. But no, not Joe.
Anyway, The Shining,
special boy.
Classic. The one I've known for a longest. Probably one of the earliest horror films I've seen. To be honest, I'm gonna rate it an 8.9. Not quite a 9, but an 8.9.
Okay. I can live with that. That's.
Go ahead. What say you?
It's a 10 from me.
10.
Yes. A 10. Yeah. A fucking 10. Because similar. Yeah. It's like it's hard to it's hard to mention them both in the same sentence, but yeah, Predator was a perfect movie for me for what it was meant to be. I gave that a 10, I think, as well. And I gave The Wailing about a 9 or something like that. I also called that a masterpiece. I think, yeah, I mean, it's not on the same level as The Shining, but both of the films that we've done recently, I'm very, very sort of happy with. The Shining, yeah, it's just, for me, it's a masterpiece. I can't find flaws in it, in a sense that would ever diminish my enjoyment of the piece. Yeah, I think just from the camera work, the cinematography, the sound design, the performances, even we haven't really talked about the performances of anyone else but Jack Nicholson. That's just because he's obviously the most
he's the
standout
role.
But the other three are actually still pretty good. It's just that again, you put them next to Jack Nicholson, and he's going to outshine all of them. But I think The Shining is almost a perfect film, really. In that the only thing is, again, it's like, okay, similar to The Wailing, it's like it does feel quite long in some areas, but I would say that, again, like watching The Shining over again, it's a lot more well paced than I might have first thought. But yeah, I've enjoyed literally every film we've done so far in the Halloween special.
With all our Halloween films we've done, they've all been, even the Asian ones are, classics. Apart from The Wailing, which is a more recent one.
Yeah.
They are, the others are classics that are well known, and all of them are very good. It's been fun to talk about, really.
Yeah, I think it's nice that we've gone back to our topic routes. I meant roots. Sorry. I think it's nice. I think it's nice that we've gone back to our sort of topic roots. Even though, again, our first episode is technically speaking a Christmas episode, we recorded horror episodes before that, and they were on zombies. We obviously both feel very passionately on the genre of zombies, but I mean, it's in our route. It's our. I did it again. It's in our route.
That's fine.
No, it's in our
router.
It's in our router, it's in our bones, it's in our makeup, our DNA as a podcast. Horror, I think, will always have a special place on this podcast.
It's always an interesting one to look at anyway.
Yeah. You usually find like a good mix of stuff with horror, like a good blancmange of stuff. So, but yeah, and then next month, I guess we'll be talking about sci-fi movies. Maybe we'll do a few scary sci-fi movies to sort of, like to bring in the next month. But
slide into those spooky sci-fis, and then
but yeah, we've been 2MoreTakes. My name is Jack.
My name has been Joe.
But now he's changing it to Josefina because now we're the 2 More Trans.
Josephine.
Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you next time.
Until next time.
Goodbye, everyone.